You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we're not afraid of anything, so ask away. We're here to tackle your tough questions. Today I have with me Julia Mumford, mental health counselor, who now is practicing in Washington State, but was a counselor and friend of mine here at Therapy Utah. Thanks for joining us, Julia.
Oh, thanks for asking me, Lindsay. I'm glad to be here.
So today we're going to dive into a topic that affects all of us at various points in our lives, transitions. Whether it's starting a new job, moving to a new city, or even entering a new phase of life, transitions can both be exhilarating and challenging. And so we're going to dive right in and get a couple of our listeners' questions about transitions that they're currently facing in their lives. So Julie, if you're ready for this, we'll just dive right in.
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so our first question is this. I'm currently navigating a major change in my life, moving to a new city for a job opportunity, and I'm feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to balance embracing this new chapter while also managing the uncertainties and challenges that come with such a big move. Any tips on staying grounded and maintaining a sense of stability during this transition would be greatly appreciated. So again, I hear this was something that was anticipated, and there's excitement and apprehension, which feels really normal. So the first thing I would love for you to talk about is tips on staying grounded. How do we stay grounded when we're anticipating such a big life change?
Well, I love that someone would even ask this question, Lindsay, because honestly, most people who are getting ready to go take a new job that they were excited about, they wouldn't be asking the question. And I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble, right? Exactly. Is that we're like, I'm going to take this new job. It's going to be fantastic. And then we're part of the way into it when we realize, whoa, this is actually a stressful life event. Like, we don't think that. So this person is already so far ahead of the game, in my opinion.
I agree. The awareness that this is going to be challenging, right?
Oh, absolutely. To me, just recognizing what is going on for you it's not like a minor thing. That's like half the battle. Is recognizing, oh, I'm going into a stressful time. And so the fact that the person is even asking, the number one thing most of us need to do with these kind of big transitions is just recognize, I'm going through a transition. This is a big thing. It's going to impact my mental health. Because if you're thinking that, then you can do something about it, right?
Exactly. And I think what you said there, it's such a good point, because even transitions that we're excited about, that we want, that we're anticipating with excitement, doesn't mean that it's going to be necessarily easy, right? And I think sometimes the fall from grace is really difficult. That, oh my gosh, I wanted this, but wait, this is really hard. Maybe I made the wrong decision. But in fact, it's maybe not about that at all. It's about the fact that it's a really major change in a person's life.
Totally. And you look at those lists of stressful life events, and some of the ones that are way up there, marriage, having a baby, accepting a new job, even moving houses. You might have just bought your dream house and you're moving to your dream house, or let's say you just retired and you've been looking forward to it all your life. And finally it happens, and you're so right that it's this moment where you're like, oh, it hits you that there are some downsides to this amazing life event, life transition. That can be the really tough moment, the fall from grace, like you're talking about. It's like, this is going to be perfect. And now where's my perfect, thing? This is so stressful. I'm struggling. That can be one of the hardest things. So I love that this person that's asking the question is saying, I have a little bit of anxiety about this, and I can actually see this is going to be a major life transition, and I'm going to have to handle it. So that's always my number one, is recognize that and label it. Recognize that this is going to be a stressful life event, and label this is going to be stressful so that you can handle it.
Awareness of it before even having it happen. I love that. Good.
Yeah.
So awareness of it, labeling it matters. Like when you said that half the battle, it really is half the battle.
Yeah.
So once we're there and we're like, okay, we know we're here. We know this is uncomfortable. Now, any tips on staying grounded? That was the question. Staying grounded and maintaining a sense of stability. Because again, I think that sense of stability is what we feel is shaky. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
our routine, what we know, like you talked about moving to a new house, we may want that new house. We may have, we're so excited about it, but everything around us has changed. So how do we maintain, again, how do we stay grounded and maintain a sense of stability during these times?
Yeah, totally. We call it stress because it's like a physical load that's being put on the whole system. And it's not just the brain, it's the body too. It's all the habits, all the things that you had stored. You were talking about going to a new house, all the ways that you're going to go find a glass to get a glass of water in the morning, how you're going to get to the bathroom in the middle of the night when you wake up. All those things are part of our muscle memory. And when we move to a new house, it's not just the stress, the cognitive load or the emotional load that we're talking about when we're talking about stress. There's actually stress on the body. The body has to learn new routines. And so I'm going to tell you my top 5 for trying to stay grounded in these situations. And I'm hoping you're going to tell me yours too.
Hey,
because
go for it.
in the time I've known you, I just feel like you have so much wisdom around that. So can we have a deal? I'll tell you my top 5, and then you can add, the ones that are important for you.
Sounds great. Yep. I'm here for it.
Awesome. So my number one thing, my number one thing is my 5 things. When I'm going through a life transition, what do I do to keep some kind of grounding? Grounding as in my feet are on the ground, like everything else is rocking, everything else is not steady. How do I maintain some kind of stability through the changes? And for me, that's 5 things. And 3 of them are exercise every single day, no matter what. Move my body, get out and move my body. And number 2 is eat healthy food. And number 3 is get a decent amount of sleep every night. And it's so funny going into a transition, how often those things just evaporate without me even being aware of them.
Is that, I'm just going to kind of put the spotlight on you for a little bit. Julia just barely moved and is actually living in transition as we speak. So I'm going to ask you, I want to put you on the hot seat. Are you doing those things? Like when you said, sometimes those are the hardest things to maintain. Have you found that even within the last couple of weeks as you've moved?
It's embarrassing, but maybe hopefully validating for other people to know that I believe in these things. I know they work. I preach them all the time to clients. I see them work in clients' lives. When we moved here, it was a tremendously stressful experience. And I realized that things were kind of rough, like I wasn't feeling great. And when I realized that in a time of transition, I'll often just go in and do my check on my big 5, and of course, when we got here, I was like, exercise. Nope. I've missed that for the last week and a half. Been moving. It's been busy. First thing to go, the exercise. Have I been eating healthy food? No, I've been eating out every meal, just because time. And then number 3, how's my sleep? No, it's staying up until, 1 or 2 in the morning, getting up early, terrible sleep habits. So one of the things I've really noticed is in the last week or so, as things have kind of started calming down a little bit, I just got up this morning and went on a bike ride, and just what a sense of peace, even and I don't know, different perspective it gives me. Just to get on the bike and go for a bike ride. It almost tells my body, you're not in panic mode anymore. Everything's going to be okay. So I'm back to eating a more healthy diet, getting more sleep, and doing the biking, and it makes a huge amount of difference. So
good for you. I'm proud of you. I'm glad to hear that. And, I do appreciate the honesty, because the reality is life gets busy and things get in the way. And it's like you said, it's one thing to say it and believe it, and then doing it, it's the whole theory and application, right? To say it is one thing, but then to do it is a different thing. And when you get stressed and things get crazy, sometimes those are the first things to go. So to answer your question, it's funny. A couple of your practices are definitely mine. I would say sleep is absolutely imperative for me. I'm not, everyone knows that when mom and Lindsay get tired, it's just not a good thing. So sleep is really important. Exercise is also a non-negotiable for me. Another one I would say is being in nature for me is really important and restorative. So for me, if I can exercise at the gym, that's okay. But if I can exercise in nature, it's a different level of restoration for me that grounds me. And it also, I feel like like when you're talking about your bike ride, I thought that's exactly what it is. It gives me perspective. Like, okay, there's more going on than just my own world and what's going on in my head. It makes me feel smaller in the grand scheme of things. And that provides perspective, which is really valuable for me. And then for me, it's also spiritual practices, maintaining a spiritual practice that feels grounding for me and the consistency with that. So again, for different people, it's different, but for me, it being alone, being in, part of that for me is journaling. Journaling is hugely restorative and is part of my spiritual practice. I also do a journaling that for me, I call it a brain dump. And I actually just talked to one of my closest friends the other day and I said, listen, if anything ever happens to me, this is where my brain dump journal is. And your job is to burn it because I don't want anyone to ever read it. But it's a really helpful way for me to just get all the things going on in my head out. And I don't, it's, we always have so many thoughts, especially when there's stress. And if I can just get it out on a paper without editing, filtering, it's really, really valuable for me. So those would be mine that feel
I love that.
And I actually call them my non-negotiables. Like those are my daily non-negotiable practices that help me stay grounded. And when you said that, I agree with you. When we talk about transition, I know I do not like transition. And even like summer comes and I like summer, but I know the first 2 weeks of summer, I'm kind of going to be hating it because I just don't have my rhythm. I'm not in a cadence that feels good yet. And I know after a couple of weeks, I'm going to get there. But knowing that, like you said earlier, is really valuable because I don't go, oh, the summer's the worst. And here we go. It's just like, no, this is uncomfortable. And I know I got to get comfortable being uncomfortable for at least a couple of weeks. And then it usually passes.
I'm so glad you said that, Lindsay, because we kind of have our non-negotiables or my big five, which my last two would be those spiritual practices that you're talking about too. And I think what you said about it being the beginning of the summer and things being hard, I have a little thing that I say to myself a lot of times, and it's beginnings are hard. Which is like something that I started saying to myself a long, long time ago when I realized it's never easy at the beginning. So I'm thinking about this person taking the new job and how excited they are for it. And those first few weeks, no matter how great you think the job is going to be and how excited you are about it, the first few weeks are going to be bad.
Yep.
I just think it's a rule.
And to not anticipate anything less. Like it might be your dream job and it might be the best thing ever, but those first couple weeks are really uncomfortable. So again, awareness of that. So really, really helpful. I love that as again, helping to stay grounded and a sense of stability. So even that perspective, I feel like is really valuable in terms of a sense of stability during transition. Like it's going to get better, but beginnings are hard. I think that's a great piece of advice.
And just say it to yourself. You just say it to yourself when you come home on the third day of your dream job and it was awful and you feel like you don't fit in and you feel like the culture is terrible and it's never going to work, that you just say to yourself, beginnings are hard. It's too soon to make a decision. Beginnings are hard.
Beginnings are hard. I like that. Such a good mantra. Good. Well, I want to ask one more question from another listener, and this one's a different phase of life. And so I just want to go ahead and read that and get some of your thoughts on that. So here's the question. Our last child left for college last year. I've been dreading being an empty nester for the last 10 years. But at first, things went really well. We went on a cruise to celebrate, and I turned his room into a painting studio. I work full time and to have my hobbies. I work full time and have my hobbies, and he has his. It seems like an easy transition. It's not anymore. And the problem is my marriage. We used to have lots of things to do together, the kids, games, concerts, and things. Now we don't have much of anything. He still seems to fill his time with outdoor stuff. He's never home before 7 p.m. and sometimes even later. He would be happy if I joined him on a mountain bike ride or a run, but I'm not as outdoorsy as he is. I keep trying to find things to keep myself busy, but if I do leave to go with friends or whatever, he comes home and the house is empty, and he hates that. When we try to talk about it, that starts a fight, which is just miserable. Then he comes home early and we sit there just staring at each other, which is not any better. How do I find my way through this? This is a complicated one.
Oh, I was just thinking, this is true transition, right?
Yeah.
That I think a lot of people my age, kind of fear looking forward, that empty nester thing. And there may be some positives buried in there, but some people anticipate it with joy, getting rid of the kids, and some people worry about it. And probably no matter how you think about it, it's not going to be what you expect.
Right. And as I'm hearing this, there's not just one transition. There's multiple transitions that affect other transitions.
Totally. I think that's what makes it so complicated. Mm-hmm. Is that you've got so much going on here. And part of it is the structure that kids really give to your life. Like, that provides a scheduling structure of where you're going to be and what you're going to do. And if you were on the same page with your spouse about supporting your children, then it kind of gives you a place to be together. A lot of the time you're sitting there on the sidelines, watching whatever game or whatever activity. And it's not about, what do we want to do? It's about what that schedule is set by the school, by the sports club or whatever. And suddenly you haven't just lost a child. You've also lost your schedule.
Yeah. And a schedule is, as you're raising family and you're busy, a schedule is when people live and die by their schedule. So to not have that anymore can feel like you're losing your footing in a lot of ways.
Sure. And, it's kind of like, that moving to the new house and where are the cups? You don't know anymore.
Exactly. And as you were talking, I also thought about purpose. We have this shared sense of purpose. We're supporting the kids. This is what they're doing. And then all of a sudden those kids are gone and they're off doing all the things we want them to be doing. But our sense of purpose has now changed. And that can be also really unsettling.
That's such a perfect comment, Lindsay, because I think it goes to the heart of what makes every life transition tough. We were in it, it's like you're floating down the river in an inner tube. I don't know if you've ever done that, but you're just, there's a lot to think about. There's the bank over there and there's this log snag, and you're just looking at the rocks and you're floating the river. That's what you're doing. And then all of a sudden this life transition comes along and you're standing on the bank and you're looking at the river and you're asking a lot of questions about that. Is this even the river I want to be floating? Do I want to be floating in a river at all? It's very existential. It's very much about meaning, and all the research helps us know that there's a huge chunk of happiness that is about meaning and purpose in our life. So where you've had this meaning and you've been living it out day to day in a shared schedule with your spouse, all of a sudden the schedule is gone. It feels like the kid is gone, and the meaning, it can feel really disorienting. What is the meaning of my marriage? What is the meaning of my life? Because all of a sudden, all of that, the life transition just gets yanked away, and you're not really sure.
I love that analogy of being in the river, floating, and then watching it. Right, we're in a different position than we were.
Yeah.
One thing I hear in this question too is that she's really trying, she said, I keep trying to find things to keep myself busy, right? But it almost sounds like she's not sure what really makes her tick anymore. Like,
Yeah.
making myself busy is very different than finding purpose, as we're talking about that. So, how does a person who's really lived their life for their children and their children's schedule just rediscover what makes them tick, what makes them light up inside? What does that look
Yeah.
like?
I'm so glad that you identified this as the heart of this question, because I think you're right. It's kind of like the transition has happened, and I'm trying to hold on to the old thing. I'm trying to stay there by, okay, I'm missing this activity. Can I plug in something else? When really you're saying, hey, I think you might need to go deep to this level of what is my purpose. And there's so many ways to answer this question. So one just comes to mind though, and I'm going to throw it out there because you mentioned journaling. I think journaling can be really helpful in these kinds of situations because we can kind of hear our own thoughts. You can kind of pin them down on the paper and get a look at them. And one of the activities that I really like during a time of transition, and it kind of goes to what the research has found that helps us to be resilient, and that is having a forward-looking perspective. So future orientation as opposed to a past or even a present orientation in these moments of transition. If we can pull in some of that future orientation, it can make the transition smoother. It can help to make us more resilient. And so this is just one of the things that I found for myself and for clients that can be helpful. And that is to try to get into your head a couple of years down the road and just write yourself a letter. So just imagine for this person, let's just imagine for this questioner, like it's 2 years down the road now, and everything has sorted itself out. And this transition actually went great. And my life is even better than it was before. Can I have this later version of myself, this wiser, more experienced version of myself, write me a letter and tell me what went well in the transition? I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I've watched it just work for people, and it's worked for me. Like just open my mind to these possibilities where I've been stuck in a place where those have been hard to see.
I love that idea of writing yourself a letter and not sticking, again, when you say that, what it makes me think is it's perspective. It's more than the here and now, but there's something more. There's something bigger. And what does that look like? And I think sometimes we get caught in, I think this way. I just think in this little box, and we forget that we actually have a lot of choices, and this is our one wild life. We get to decide what it looks like. And I love that. Glennon Doyle always says, you have one wild life. And I always think, yes. And I get to decide what that one wild life looks like. And sometimes in the trench, when all I can see is dirt around me, it's really tricky to actually have that perspective to say, wait a minute, I get to be the author of my own story. I'm the captain of this ship. I get to decide what this is going to look like. So I love that idea of the letter and 2 years down the road, what this would look like. Such a great idea. As one of the things she said as well in this, it made me, I'm thinking about it is really, she's trying to figure out how does she engage with her husband, right? She's engaging with her husband in a different way. And so what does that look like? She's saying, he's outdoorsy. He likes to mountain bike. I don't as much. What does that look like? How does she re-engage in a new way, right? The way they've engaged before is very different. It's certainly been around kids and schedules, as we talked about, and now it's just them. What does that look like, do you think?
Yeah, I think they have to fall in love again. I think we all do when we go through these major transitions with our partners. I think it's like, okay, okay, who are you? And I don't know if you've read Anne Morrow Lindbergh before, but she writes so beautifully about this. And it's like, we've moved out of that old place where we were, that old shell, and we have to find something new for us. And that's a shared conversation. So if we've fallen out of the habit of having a regular connection with our partner, we need to establish new connection points that work. And that, oh boy, that means having an open mind. I don't know if you find this in your marriage, but anytime we go through some kind of transition, finding a new way to relate to each other and to really care about what is mattering, to my partner, and to engage with him in a way that lets us both talk about shared goals for now. Our new goals may be different. Our new way of living may be different. But if she wants to get started with that project, they need to find a space where they enjoy being together and communicating. So I don't know what that might be for them.
And that might look different than it has in the past.
Sure.
And
different,
probably most likely
yeah.
will, right? And one thing you said, it made me think of this phrase, if it matters to you, it matters to me, right? So it may not be my favorite thing. And that doesn't mean, she needs to start becoming a mountain biker, but like having some interest in what he's doing and vice versa shows, you know what, you matter to me, and I'm attentive to you, and I want this to continue to thrive in a different environment without our children together, right? So I love that idea of really rediscovering. I mean, that's what I keep thinking and hearing, is there's rediscovering that happens in these transitions and can be a really beautiful thing. So when you think about that, is there anything that you can say, you know what, transitions, there are so much benefit that can happen in transition. What would you say are some of the benefits that you can, in this discomfort, if we can, again, look farther out, what are some of the benefits that come from transition?
Well, there's a whole body of research on this, Lindsay, as you probably know, that's the post-traumatic growth, research that shows when your life gets upended, and it can be upended in so many ways, so many good things can come to you if you're able to move into a growth phase and see something like this, a major life transition, as an opportunity to grow. We get stronger. We get different perspectives they come from all of the things that we've been talking about doing today. We discover parts of ourselves that otherwise may never have existed. She might be a mountain biker,
True.
I may be a golfer. That's undiscovered. That's undiscovered territory. But as she accepts this invitation from her husband, and hopefully he accepts an invitation from her, it's not a zero-sum game. We discover that you were saying you feel like you're in the trench and everything around you is just dirt. And that can be how it feels when we're in the middle of something this stressful. And the whole goal is to get out of that rigidity and get into a new place of possibility and opportunity. And all of us know stories about what gets discovered when we open the door and enter the realm of possibility for ourselves. So the pain of transition a lot of times can push us to do that.
Such a good point. Growth is inevitable, and whether we choose to embrace it or not is really the question. Well, thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your expertise with us today. Although transitions are uncomfortable, they're natural and they're a part of our journey. By understanding them and equipping ourselves with the right tools, I really think we can navigate them with confidence and emerge stronger than ever. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends, rate and review, and we'll see you next time.